You'll have to let me know something because I can't see it. From deep inside the piney woods of Northeast Texas, you are listening to Talk of the Night. And now, your host, Paranormal Phil. Good evening, good morning, wherever you may be around the world. I am your host, Paranormal Phil, and this is Talk of the Night. Sorry about the late start. We are having technical issues with the whole Zoom not wanting to work, OBS not wanting to work right. I don't know. It could be the heat for this. So we are trying to get my guest on. I don't know what's going on. But until then, we're going to talk. And tonight, if we can get him on, we're supposed to be talking about, excuse me, conspiracies and secret societies and movies and TV and all that good stuff. Now, when I say we're talking about conspiracies and secret societies, I'm not talking about the actual conspiracies or the secret societies. We're talking about the movies and how they portray these conspiracies and secret societies. So it's a little bit different than just trying to talk about the conspiracies. We could do that all day long on another show. We did a show on conspiracies on again, you'll hear my producer in the background. She is trying to get things situated with my guests. But anyways, we're going to talk about we on Friday we talked about conspiracies, and we talked about AI is the AI takeover here. We got into some films in that live stream. So we are going to talk about maybe not so much those films that we talked about in that, but we might. Now I'm going to bring up, because I do have some movies and I want to talk about them, and I'm going to ask him about them if we can get him on. But some of the conspiracy movies and everything like that, and secret society movies, the Philadelphia experiment, which was a conspiracy theory up until they announced it, was actually true. National Treasure, both 1 and 2. There is conspiracies on that. Now, there's nothing there that says that that's true or not, but again, They Live, the Da Vinci Code, MIB. We know there are men in black out there, so we know they're. Sorry, I'm just trying to hear what she's trying to say at the same time, but we do have MLB out there, and there's been proof that they exist. But now, as far as secret societies in films, one of my favorite films about secret societies, Eyes Wide Shut, with what's his name? I can't think. It's Tom Cruise, yeah, and everything like that, where there's this whole Masonic rituals, and everything like that, and then of course Minority Report, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That's some of the stuff that we're going to get into tonight. If we can get him on the air, we're trying to bring him on. Now, a little bit about Albert, just so that we could, because if we can get him on here, I think said that he's a retired freelance writer, but according to his thing, it says he currently, I don't know see the OBS unless you decide that. Oh, you're doing the YouTube. Okay, never mind. But he currently writes about films for his Substack, Final Cut, and Retro Reviews. He does film reviews on his stream, sneak reviews on Note, NOTD, and has a TV newsletter on Beehive called As Seen on TV. I also heard on his one of the podcasts that he did is he worked in radio, not the kind of radio that I used to do, which is talk radio, but he was more into radio, the whole board system that controls everything. And I'm trying to see something. Okay. Why? Oh, okay. I was about to say, why am I delayed here on YouTube? But
Hello.
But anyways, so what's that? Wait. Wait. Oh, that's me. Sorry about that.
Okay, I will go over there and do that.
All right. So I don't know why YouTube is delayed so badly tonight, but it is. So anyways, if you're watching live, I apologize. Something, I think it's the heat, because we topped out at 100 degrees, and with the humidity and some storms in the area, it just messed everything up. But we are trying to get my guest on the show, and we'll get the show going. It's going to probably be shorter because we're already 12 minutes into the show. But again, like I said, if you're listening or watching live, join the chat, join the discussion in the chat. Feel free to ask me questions or ask my guest questions when he comes on, and I will read them off of the chat and give them to him. That way he can answer them. Or until we get him on, feel free to ask me questions. Now, I do want to mention we do have a contest going on where if the next 50 people that subscribe to the YouTube channel can enter for a chance to win one of 3 books from past guests. And good.
We're gonna have to use this, and then I'm gonna have to figure out what's going on the other way. We have to use the one.
All right, so I guess we got Albert on the line now, finally. You there?
After the longest introduction probably in the history of your program, I'm sure.
It happens. It happens,
Now,
trust me.
yes,
That's the thing about live radio.
That's right. I'm currently on the X-Files tour, as I call it. So, because I've been doing Into the Paranormal, great show. I did a couple episodes of that, and now I'm here on Talk in the Night.
Yeah,
so I call it the
I don't know if you've ever
X-Files
heard of Coast to Coast AM.
Well, that's why I called it the X-Files tour. I would call it the Coast to Coast AM tour, but I like the X-Files tour because you call yourself the Paranormal Phil.
Yeah.
I used to call myself, because I was an X-Files fan, I used to call myself the non-smoking man. So, fair enough.
Yeah, anyways, let's get started.
I'm not territorial, but it's easy to think that there was some force or some group or some organization behind this delay, folks. There wasn't
Oh, trust me,
this technical
I
delay.
believe it. I've had issues with shows where I'm talking about uh, this kind of conspiratorial stuff and things go haywire. Uh,
Well, it's interesting. Before I move on, I was on a show called The Ocelli Effect years ago. I think 2015. It was the first time I was on the show. And I was talking about, I'm sure you're aware of this to some extent, the Inslaw affair and the octopus and the death of Danny Casolaro. And I, at one point, was kicked off the air, technically. I was on talking with the host. Then all of a sudden, when I heard it on YouTube later on, it was almost like some kind of, I don't know what kind of sound it was. It was something. And the next thing I knew, I was off the air. I had to call back and finally got back on the air, thank goodness. But I've had a couple of times where I was mysteriously kicked off the air on a couple of shows. I would just chalk it up to technical reasons, but you never know.
yeah,
That's what happens, I guess, when you talk in the night.
well, I mean, when like mentioned, talk coast to coast AM, I got my start with listening to Coast AM and the late great Art Bell.
Mhm.
And that's
Yeah.
what got me interested in doing talk radio. And I spent 30 years in the paranormal field, so I figured I can talk about this stuff and I can do radio. And it took me a while to learn, but I did it like for 10 years before I finally took a 4 year hiatus, and then I just recently brought it back last month. So, I mean, but in the past, I've always had that problem where I was thinking of something controversial and something goes haywire.
Interesting. And I guess this is controversial. I mean, we're talking about conspiracies and secret societies and movies and TV shows, where it's not like we're talking about
The
these
actual,
secret societies in
yeah,
their own nature, like
you're cutting out on sound.
actuality in the real world. I think that's the REA. Interesting, but you never know. Like I said, you
Oh,
never know. Like I
wait.
said, I
We got
like I
double
told you,
sound.
I had a couple instances where I was knocked off the air. Ooh, weird night, isn't it?
It
A
is.
weird night.
All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's get into it.
It's a
So
very
tell,
coast to coast with Art Bell type of night.
it is.
Uh,
All right.
isn't
So
it? Isn't it? Yeah.
tell the listeners and viewers a little bit about you, so they can get to know you.
All right. I'm a former freelance journalist, former and writer, a former print journalist. I was a print journalist and freelancer for 22 years, wrote for a variety of newspapers and magazines, including for Honolulu Weekly, Pacific Business News, Asian Week, Hawaii Film and Video. I was also a film reviewer, online film reviewer mostly, for a film website called Ain't It Cool News. I covered film festivals in my home state. I did that specifically as a reviewer for 8 years, continuing on from when I was doing it largely as a journalist. The larger context, I did film festivals 15 years. So, specifically as a film reviewer, 8 years. And I was a film reviewer 8 years. And so, like I said, journalist, freelance writer. Also, I've been a ghostwriter for over 10 years and retired after 22-year career in 2017. Wrote a blog on medium.com, which was about news and current events, or I should say media and current events. And then went to Substack and set up a couple of Substack newsletters there. Got back into writing about films. So I did Final Cut, which you can find at allanier.substack.com, and Final Substack / retro review, which is movies from the past that I review, You can find that at thumbsdown.substack.com. And I also just created 2 new newsletters, one on Noted, NOTD, which I do film reviews as well. It's called Sneak Reviews. It's a stream there. And I'm also on Beehive, but I do something a little different on Beehive. I deal with TV shows. Now, I used to be a film critic, but I'm not a TV critic, never was a TV critic, never was a TV writer. Um, just as a TV viewer, somebody watched TV shows. So I have a newsletter on Beehive called As Seen on TVs. I have a couple of articles there. People can go to Beehive to check that out, and they can also go to Noted to check out my brand new, fairly new stream called Sneak Reviews. So movies at Noted, NOTD, and TV on Beehive at As Seen on TVs.
Now,
And so that's what's keeping me busy. Also, podcasts. I'm finishing on my podcast, Final Cut, which was in the title of this episode. I'm going to be finishing out that this month, and I've done that for 3 seasons or so. And I have another podcast called The Write Off, which is about writing. So that's about it.
all right.
Got to
Now,
squeeze all that in.
I noticed on, I think it's the Abnormal podcast, because I was listening to that, and I noticed you talked about working in radio, and I noticed it was more on the control board side of things than what I do, basically.
Right. I was a board op. So I did news when I was in college. I attended a liberal arts college called the University of Hawaii, West Oahu, where I got my bachelor's degree in the 90s. And during my time in college, I went to the other campus, major campus in the system, one of the major campuses in the system. I went there to work for their radio station. It was a volunteer job, but it was a radio station, KTUH, and I did news there. So I anchored the news there for my junior year. Didn't go back my senior year, and then when I got out of college, when I graduated, I worked for an oldies rock station as a board operator. I was playing oldies rock music, Beatles, Stones, Doors, Birds, all kinds of classic rock and classic pop music. And so I was in radio commercially and then in college. So most of my time was in college, but both college and terrestrial commercial radio. So ex-board op, ex-radio guy.
So you did that before you got into writing? Or was it?
Yeah. In fact, actually, I was looking for radio work. I wasn't intending to be a freelance writer. I was looking for another job in radio. And to be brutally honest, I could go back to radio now. Yeah. It's funny. It's funny how weird life is. Life is very weird. Last year, I'm not a sports junkie or George Floyd's fanatic, but I was a guest analyst on a show last year based in Temecula, California, called The Writer Report. I was doing NFL Hot Topics. So I was a guest analyst doing that for first time I did that. So I kind of returned to radio a little doing that. So who knows? I don't know if I'm going to go back to radio, but I've been very busy with my writing right now, my post-retirement writing and my podcasts. So that's what's keeping me busy.
Yeah.
Trying to take a break this year, which is why I'm doing interviews.
Now, how did you get started into writing about films and TV?
Well, in regards to films, I actually learned about movies when I was, and I talked about this a couple of years ago when I was celebrating my 30th anniversary. I was doing interviews about that. So I actually, when I was a kid, about 12 years old, there was a course in my local library. And it was, I think, literally called movie making course. And I took that, Mondays at 3 p.m. I came home, it was my 7th grade year. And that's where I got my basic education in film. It was really how I learned about movies was actually through So I learned the storyboard, I learned the shot list, learned a little editing, little lighting, basic filmmaking. I was very young though, and you know, I came out of that course, after about a year, and they kind of shut down. They no more courses at my local library, so they actually gave us a party, and we got to see. I don't know if I should admit this, but I have already. I saw a bootleg version of ET at the time. Now this is 1983, so ET was not out on video yet. Got to see ET, but I had seen ET in the theaters. So the problem was that I didn't have any access to film and video equipment. So there was none at home. My parents didn't have any. There was nothing in the family. So what I wound up doing was I ended up attending the local film festival in my hometown. I think when I was 15, I was in high school. And so if the course I took when I was a kid was like undergrad film school, this was graduate film school. You're getting to meet filmmakers, you're watching movies. That's how I treated it. And so I ended up going to college, as I mentioned, UH West Oahu. And I was going to the festival through college. And once I got out, I became a freelancer. And after I'd done radio, I ended up a freelancer. And I had turned in an article that I wrote for a local newspaper. And I needed another article. I need some idea because you can't survive as a freelance writer and a journalist unless you're constantly either pitching or getting assignments. And so I'd attended my local film festival and I went, why don't I just cover that film festival? I've been there. I've gone to films. I know a little of the score because I've been there. And so I pitched it to this newspaper I was writing for, this suburban newspaper. They liked it. And that's how I ended up writing really about movies. I started out writing features about really feature coverage of the local film festival here in Hawaii, the Hawaii Film Festival. And I did that, like I said, 15 years basically, including being a film reviewer, online film reviewer. So I started out writing about movies really by covering the local film festival. And I did that because I needed another idea to pitch to a newspaper I was writing for. Because as a freelancer, you either pitch or you get assignments. So I guess it was survival of the fittest, the Spencerian aspect at work. So yeah, that's really how I wound up writing about film really throughout my life. And then I became a film reviewer. I was writing for Ain't It Cool News, which is a film website. And then I stopped in 2010. I stopped attending film festivals because I was kind of burnt out. And I stopped writing about movies. And I came back to writing movies in 2024 when I founded Final Cut. And then last year I spun off a section called Retro Review, which is how Final Substack came about. It's a review Substack that I do. So I've returned to writing about film. So it started out really as a journalist, local journalist covering film festivals. And it's blossomed into, reviewing older movies and writing film essays now.
Yeah, and of course, like me, I started doing talk radio just as a hobby. I thought, okay, I can talk about the paranormal. I got plenty of knowledge on it, and I figured, it's just something to do. And it blossomed until where I was doing it 5 days a week, 2 hour shows a week, and I was working basically 70 hours a week doing everything by myself, all the board operation. I'm not doing as much now because I got a producer, but and then I think it was 2000 2022. I think I took a 4 year break, and I said I'm getting burnt out on doing radio, and then I decided that okay, I'm gonna bring. I think it was 24. I said, let me try to bring the Talking Night back on the airwaves. And I went to college to learn the marketing aspect of things so I could market my show better.
Mhm.
And turns out that the course that I went to was more about filmmaking than it was about marketing.
Mm.
So I learned about filmmaking, and I thought, okay, well, let me try my hand maybe at filmmaking. Maybe it's my turn to write about horror films, or because horror films are my thing. I got
Mhm.
two short horror films uh, out on YouTube. I got two full length horror movie screenplays ready to go when I can get somebody to film them for me. And and then of course I got a full length documentary on kind of conspiracy things. So um, I learned about filmmaking, but I because of my disability from the military, I could like the course would want me to hold the boom mic and for long periods of time, and I know how working on a set can be because I'm
Yeah.
in. I think it was it was 1994. I was on the set of the Power Rangers TV show for 8 hours. So I know how
Oh,
long it
jeez.
takes to film a scene and how long those people working those things, holding those boom mics and everything else takes. And it's like, oh, I was like, forget it. I learned enough on
Yeah.
filmmaking. Let me just get back
Well,
to radio.
I had to do boom mics when I was taking my course when I was 12, 13 years old, my film course. So I did a little of that. I don't know if I should tell the story, but I remember I was holding my, they were interviewing one of the librarians, and I wasn't very good at, like, because you got to have stamina when you're holding that boom mic.
Hmm.
And I was trying to like to keep it out of frame, but it came all the way into frame. It was like zoom, and it almost hit the poor lady, and it just stopped near her face.
Wow.
It was crazy. I'm like, oh my goodness. We saw it again. It was like crazy. It was like, this is why I don't crew. Never work crew. My thoughts of filmmaking when I was a kid was writer, director, producer.
Yeah.
Not a crew guy.
Yeah,
Um,
I
um,
wanted when I did the film, I wanted to be a horror film director and screenwriter,
mhm.
not all this other stuff. But of course, to get the associate's degree, I had to go through all these other courses.
Oh yeah.
And
Well, I had to do camera too when I was a kid, and I hated the cameras in the '80s, going through the eyepiece and all that. The cameras they have now, I wish I had when I was a kid learning filmmaking. Oh, I wish I had those cameras. GoPro, I don't know if you can do a movie with a GoPro, but that would have been
well,
great.
well, the short horror films that I have and the full length documentary that I have were all shot on my iPhone.
Yep, that's right.
And
If I
I
had a
mean,
phone when I was a kid, I
yeah,
would have been able to go out and make films. Didn't. It's the '80s, so never had
yeah,
any access to that. So I ended up basically writing about movies instead. I
yeah,
wrote about movies instead. Ended up doing it, and to be honest, I'm a lot happier. Like I was happy that I went to college and got my
mm,
degree and studied English and history, and
mm,
it didn't become a filmmaker. I
yeah.
know that's not that people want to hear, but I know so much about the industry, and it's so hard. It's
Yeah,
so difficult.
I
It's
know
so,
the feeling. Like I said,
yeah,
something always kept dragging me back to radio, and of course, here I am.
right.
But anyways,
Yeah,
let's get back
well,
into
familiarity.
yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
So let's get back into the movies and the topic of
Right.
tonight's show is what got you to dive down that
Sorry.
rabbit hole to write about conspiracies and secret societies in film.
Well, it's interesting you asked that because I had been living in LA back in the '90s, and I came home to Hawaii Uh, I've lived in LA twice, so I've been around Hollywood. I literally have been in Hollywood, the neighborhood, but not around the film industry per se.
Mm.
But I had come home and I started listening to local talk radio, which had I heard talk radio in the parts of the places where I lived before, like Seattle and LA, but not local talk radio so much.
Mm.
And there was a lady who had a talk show on this channel, on this station, and she was talking about stuff like the Bilderbergs and Trilateral Commission and the 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 Bohemian. I think it was the Bohemian Club,
Human Grove.
the Bohemian Grove. Well, Bohemian Club and their retreat is the Bohemian Grove,
Yeah.
and then also like the Federal Reserve. And I know I know a little about the Federal Reserve, but I didn't know about all these other aspects. I'm like, what is this? I don't know this. And this was the 90s, so it was like the late 90s. So I
Mhm.
went to a library, couldn't Google it. Went to a library and I said, look, there are these organizations. I want to find out if there are any books or anything I could read. She did a little research. I got, I think, maybe a couple books or books that had some of that information in them and read about them. And I found that they were interesting, but they didn't interest me as something I would want to go into as a serious scholar or writer about conspiracy, about secret
Mm.
societies. So they were interesting in a sort of entertaining way,
Mm.
which came in handy because in 1997 I saw the movie Conspiracy Theory, and what I realized when I saw this movie, the Mel Gibson movie, obviously,
Mhm.
I realized that I knew all about these conspiracies and all these things that Jerry Fletcher, the character that Mel Gibson plays, was talking about, and I'm like, this is what I realized was I got fascinated with the idea of conspiracy in movies. It was fascinating to see all these conspiracies up on the screen.
Mm.
What wasn't interesting to me was seeing them in real life, because in real life it just seemed like conspiracies and
Yeah.
secret societies. It didn't interest me. But when I saw it in movies, because I have a background in regards to movies, I got really interested. It made me wonder, why is this a subject? Why go into this area? Why put this on the screen? And so that's the operative. It's always the why. So
Mm.
when I talk about conspiracies and secret societies, it's always in movies. Why? So I actually am coming back to discussing it. I talked about this 15 years ago, actually. I was interviewed about it years ago. And then because I get interviewed about great many things over the years, on shows, because I've been interviewed for, I don't know, 15 years on shows. Um, I ended up kind of moving on. That's the way I am. It's like a
Mhm.
cycle. I do this subject and get interviewed about it, and then I do another subject, get interviewed about it. Because I've done research on certain subjects in certain areas, certain topics. And so it keeps me busy, I guess, in regards to bookings on shows like this.
Mm.
But what happened was that there's a YouTube channel called Control Alt History, and they deal with conspiracy and secret societies and certain things to a certain extent. And
Mm.
they were doing videos, I think they still do videos about conspiracies, conspiratorial movies based on real events or some real aspects. And
Mm.
I saw a few of those. I had made a suggestion to the host about one movie. I think I suggested 3 Days of the Condor, one of my favorite uh, Robert Redford movies.
Mm.
And I kind of realized, I used to talk about this kind of stuff years ago. I'm not, well, I write about film now. Why not? And since I do things that are film related and I'm interviewed mostly about movies, that's what I've
Mm.
chosen to do because film is the specific area that I concentrate on.
Yeah.
I thought, why not talk about it? And so that's why I've talked about it. So I've been on at least one other show talking about this. And so that's why I'm talking about it now is really watching Control Alt History and
Yeah.
watching that YouTube channel got me interested in talking about it again.
Yeah. Because like last Friday, or this past Friday, I was talking about the AI takeover? Is it here? This Friday, I'm talking about the end of money and freedom, and I kind of delved down that conspiracy road. But like as you said, you delve more into films, and I want to talk about some films, and I want to get your take on these films and talking about the how they what your thought is the movie versus the actual conspiracy, if you will,
Interesting.
on it, like the
Interesting.
Philadelphia experiment.
Right. Now, that's interesting with Philadelphia experiment because initially years ago, I remember when it came out, I was a teenager. I thought the Philadelphia experiment was fiction, like the movie was fiction.
Mm,
And I heard over the years that it was based on actual experiments.
mm,
And unless I see documents, unless I see verified information, I'm not going to say absolutely, but it's certainly plausible and logical that teleportation would be an aspect that the US government had looked into because they've looked into such stuff like remote viewing,
mm,
getting these psychics together and getting them.
yeah.
And this has
MK
been
Ultra.
done through government auspices. Yeah, MK Ultra, which is mind control, right? Yeah,
Mm,
people in the psychiatric version, psychological section of the company, which is
mm,
the CIA, dealing with this. Um, and it's funny, the movie Conspiracy Theory does kind of deal with MK Ultra to an extent with the Jerry
mm.
Fletcher character and Dr. Jonas character, who was played by Patrick Stewart. So, yeah, Philadelphia Experiment was something I thought was fiction until years later. I went, yeah, it's logical. I mean, it makes sense. Why not have the ability to move objects through
Mm.
some kind of energy displacement method?
Yeah,
It
and
makes
of
sense.
course with everything, like look at how long it took for like them to finally acknowledge Area 51 was
Right.
real.
Well, yeah, but are they going to acknowledge that Area 52 is real?
Yeah, that might be another 30 years down the road.
That's right. The Tonopah training, I think training site or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, they'll talk about Area 51, but they won't mention Area 52.
yeah.
I wonder if the Janet flights go there too. Just
I
curious.
haven't looked into that. I might have to, but anyways, let's talk about some other movies that have to do
Mhm.
with conspiracies.
Yeah,
Like, well, let's go with MIB. Of course, we've seen
Men in
video.
Black.
There's, yeah, we've seen, or at least I've seen video, CCTV camera footage of these men in black suits, but there's no. I mean, they had a weird look, but it could be artifacts from the camera or something else that made them look
Right.
weird. But is
Well,
I believe
that's
there is the MIB
you
in.
believe there are MIBs. See, that's an area. See, here's the interesting thing about MIB. That's a movie that's very entertaining, very well done. And that's an area where you take a phenomena like MIB, which is debatable and questionable, and you turn it into something very kind of high concept for Hollywood. Men in Black is kind of an imprint, kind of a nicely done vehicle because you take this. I mean, it shows what you can do with some of these what would have been far out ideas, and you could transform them into kind of almost popcorn mainstream Hollywood movies. So MIB is interesting that way. But before I move on to other stuff, what I wanted to note was the thing about conspiracy movies in terms of my analysis is that I look at is what I bring out is that with these conspiracy movies, conspiratorial oriented movies, in my analysis, I look at the movies are usually organized around a protagonist and maybe a protagonist or sidekick or something, but a protagonist, which means main character. And the protagonist and the protagonist is someone who winds up going from, for example, innocence to experience. That's the first tenet of a conspiracy movie. So you look at a movie like, for example, Enemy of the State, 1998, with Will Smith. He's a lawyer. He's somebody who's just working at his profession, his job, and he ends up being framed for murder. And so he goes from someone who's completely unaware of this NSA or NSA type organization that's conducting massive surveillance on American citizens to being someone who's now aware of it because he's got to work with a Harry Cole type character. It's a throwback to Gene Hackman's character. It's a throwback to the 1974 movie, The Conversation, which was directed by Francis Ford Coppola. And so he's now with this guy who knows something about surveillance, and so is able to move from someone who's completely unaware, completely innocent, not aware of what is going on, to someone who now is learning. So innocence to experience. That's the first tenet when you look at these conspiracy movies.
Yeah, because I was about to ask you, how do you go about analyzing these different characteristics?
Mm-hmm. So that's the first tenet, let's just say the first column, the first principle, the first aspect, innocence to experience. The second aspect is what I call accessing secrets or getting information. So one of the things that, let's use, for example, in this area, the movie Blowout by Brian De Palma, right? So that involves John Travolta's character, Jack Terry, who's a sound editor, right? He's going out to capture some sound, boom mic out in the, with the boom mic. Seems to be a motif here for some reason. And he sees a car that plunges into, I guess it's a pond or river. And Jack goes in, he rescues a woman, but unfortunately there's a senator or a politician that's killed. So it's a Chappaquiddick meets, it's really a Chappaquiddick meets Antonioni's blow up type film. That's what I would describe Blowout as. And so what Jack Terry has to do is he has to find out what's going on. Obviously that you have people like the John Lithgow character in Blow Up who are assassinating people on behalf of political forces. So Jack Terry uses his skills. That's another aspect. Usually a protagonist has some kind of skill. He's got some kind of ability. I had mentioned that, the character in, I think it's Robert Clayton Dean in Enemy of the State is an attorney. You have you have Jack Terry in Blowout. He's a sound editor. So there's skill, but these are people that are finding out what's happening. So there's usually an access to information. Again, they were innocent before. They're now experiencing problems because they're on the run. In the case of that character, Robert Clayton Dean, which would be Will Smith's character, he's being framed. You have the Jack Terry character. He's trying to keep Nancy Allen's character safe because they're trying to kill her. The political forces are trying to kill her. And of course, it's about accessing secrets and information. So he's trying to find out what's going on with it. That's another tenet and hallmark, another principle of this. The third aspect and final aspect, I would say, is opposing and fighting whatever shadowy forces are out there, right? So that's a real important thing. And in that regard, I will turn to 3 Days of the Condor, which was directed by Cindy Pollock, stars Robert Redford. So you have this guy who's a reader with basically a CIA, what I would say a CIA-backed firm. It's very interesting because this is a guy who just reads books all day. His Joe Turner character is a reader. And from what I understand, the actual company in CIA actually bought you had a guy working at the CIA in the company actually buying books and using, going through these books to find out is there anything that could be referencing intelligence agencies or the company or anything else? So you have Robert Redford's character in 3 Days of the Condor. This guy is on the run because an assassin, remember Blowout, you have assassin trying to kill Nancy Allen's character. You have an assassin that's come in and killed all the people in his office. So he's the only one, and he's on the run, and he's trying to survive. So now he's got to deal with these forces within the company that are trying to, or should I say, they're trying to terminate him with extreme prejudice. So that's a matter of it. And of course, at the end of that movie, very important scene with Robert Redford and Cliff Robertson. I used that scene, interestingly, to talk about real life crises and how governments and countries handle them. When Robertson tells Robert Redford, they're having this discussion, and he says, Robert Redford says, ask them, not now. Ask them when they run out of oil. Today it's a crisis. Could be plutonium, could be oil, could be anything. You have to understand when to do things and when not to do things. And Robert's telling them, ask them, not now. When they haven't had enough to eat, when they're down and out, they won't want to ask. They'll just want us to go out and get them. That's part of how entities, I used that at the time of the pandemic. That's how some of these governments and some of these countries manage crises and deal with things. And again, I don't want to go too far in this, but I try to make the applications to reality. A lot of people look at movies as fantasy and as entertainment. They're not. One of the things I tell people is that movies are information. And what you have to do is find the information. The information is the cake. The entertainment is the frosting.
Yeah.
So
there's always a little bit of truth in every little bit of movies, especially like the conspiracy movies and everything like that.
Right. Yeah. And so when we talk about the secret societies, it's interesting. So one of the things that I always do is ask questions. It's even interesting when it comes to secret societies. In a secret society, what is secret society? Basically, a secret society is a society where the membership is generally hidden. Some of them, it may come out a little, but it's generally hidden. Their practices and what they do is generally not publicly known. And they're usually networking organizations amongst people who are usually wealthy, powerful, or both.
Yeah, and one movie that I had on the list to talk about, speaking of secret societies, was Eyes Wide Shut.
Which I've analyzed. I was on a show called Close Watch. It used to be called Crooked Table. And I've analyzed Eyes Wide Shut. Eyes Wide Shut has to be one of the most rigorously, or maybe not rigorously, rigor in terms of insanity. It has to be one of the most analyzed movies on YouTube. It has to be. There are movies that get analyzed. Eyes Wide Shut has to be one of the most. I don't think there's a Stanley Kubrick movie that's analyzed online like Eyes Wide Shut. And I've been someone who has complained for years about all these crazy analyses of Eyes Wide Shut by people. If people want to check out my analysis, you can go and look for the episode of Close Watch I was on when I did it. Eyes Wide Shut is interesting because there are a lot of interpretations to this movie, which is partly what Kubrick's work was about. Kubrick's work was not about handing you a complete, in a way, Kubrick's work was not about handing you a cooked dinner. It was about Kubrick giving you the raw food and saying, go cook this for yourself.
Yeah.
David Lynch is another one like that. And so when you look at Eyes Wide Shut, what I've said about it in the past, to briefly mention, is it's really kind of two films in one. It's a movie kind of about the domestic situation between Tom Cruise's character and Nicole Kidman's character. And then you have this kind of very intense, riveting thriller and that's where you get into the Somerton Mansion and all of that. So I feel it's like two films in one, joined
Uh,
together, but two films in one.
Now we are coming up. We're going to run a little extra longer just because of the delay, but there's a couple of things on Final Cut that you have up there that have to do with conspiracies, and I wanted to get your uh,
Okay.
what they're about. Executive inaction and a conspiracy of
Yeah.
one. Why the Truman Show is really a conspiracy film.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. Those are essays I wrote. The first is about JFK, Oliver Stone's 1991 film. The second is about the, I think, 1998 film, The Truman Show. So, what I argue about JFK, which I think I'm probably the only one to do, is that JFK is not really a pure conspiracy film. It's not really a movie about conspiracy. People think it is, but actually, it's a speculative movie. The real conspiracy movie is not JFK. It's a movie called Executive Privilege with Will Geer, Burt Lancaster, let's see, Robert Ryan. I think Dalton Trumbo was one of the writers. Mark Lane, who had done Rush to Judgment, was a consultant on the movie. That's the true conspiracy movie in regards to the JFK assassination. I highly recommend it. But the JFK is really a speculative film where, in a sense, it's really a trial movie. Even though there's a trial near the end of the movie, it's not really seen as a trial movie. It's actually a legal movie in a sense because what they're doing is they're making a legal case because they're presenting Jim Garrison, who had actually looked into the Kennedy assassination via prosecuting Clay Shaw, who, as it turned out, had worked for the CIA. But people didn't think he worked for the CIA, but it's a whole other story. So I argue that actually JFK is not a real conspiracy movie. It's just a very good political thriller. The When it comes to the Truman Show, that's interesting because the Truman Show is actually this serious kind of drama, satirical, somewhat dramedy. And my argument about the Truman Show is that it's fundamentally a conspiracy film because the conspiracy revolves around Truman. And it's this conspiracy of these actors on a show that is about him. And it has all the earmarks of what conspiracies do to people. They are unaware at first. What did I say? Innocence to experience. Then, of course, you access information. You start finding out things. Truman starts finding out things. And then finally, you start opposing and fighting this. What does Truman do? Gets on the boat near the end and heads out in the water, and they try to drown him with a huge flood. The production of the show. So when you think about it, all the earmarks of a conspiracy film, but it's not thought of that way. And I thought about Truman and I thought, this is really a conspiracy film, but nobody sees it that way.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought those up because they're two essays that I quite like and quite happy with. And the thing that I wanted to talk about in regards to secret societies is, again, what's interesting to me about secret societies, and we already mentioned the definition previously. What's interesting to me is why people, beyond those that are overly fascinated and intrigued with them, why they put them in TV shows and movies. Why? For example, I'm sure you remember the old Batman series from the 60s. Yep. Do you know that they had an episode, I think it was called Five Fine Finny Friends, where in one scene...
I think I remember that episode.
One scene, you had two elderly people talking, and there's a picture of Bruce Wayne's great-grandfather, I believe, and one of the individuals says to the other, did you know that Bruce Wayne's great-grandfather was a member of Skull and Bones at Yale? And the other says, he wasn't just a member, he helped found it. Now, why in an episode of a show like Batman, which is a comic pop show I mean, for it at its time, it was not taken as a serious, thoughtful examination of, it was a superhero
Mhm.
show, and even a very colorful pastiche pop art type show.
Mhm.
Why was this reference to Skull and Bones in this episode of Batman?
Yeah.
Not only that, the episode was supposedly episode 33. Now, as anyone who has looked at the secret societies know, that of course is the
The
highest level within the Freemasons.
Messianic lodge. Yeah.
So why? You also have a show like Barney Miller. I know people remember Barney Miller, ran from the 70s, I think, in the early
Mhm.
80s. There's an episode where Jeffrey Tambor, if you don't know who he is, there's a show called Arrested Development. He was one of the stars of that show. He's been on a number of other shows and movies. But he is brought into the station because it was a cop show. And they said this guy went to the Trilateral Commission and tried to wreck the place. And this guy talks about, and you see this now, this guy talks about the 1980 Republican convention where um, George Bush became the vice presidential nominee instead of, there was this talk about Reagan and Ford running as a ticket. Um, but that didn't happen. And he talked about John Anderson, who was an independent candidate, right? Because he's talking about the members of the Trilateral Commission. You mentioned Jimmy Carter, John Anderson, George Bush.
Mhm.
Why use Trilateral Commission, which is a very real organization? And they
Yeah.
explain it briefly what the organization is. Why mention them? Why not create some organization, call it the Tripartite Commission?
Yeah.
Why? And then there's a show that's on Netflix. I don't know if it's still on Netflix, but a show from the Netherlands called Ares. Ares, of course, god of war. This is a show about the fraternities and the student societies in the Netherlands, at universities in the Netherlands. These student fraternities like the Amsterdam Student Corps and Minerva, and gets into that, and these kind of vehicles for the wealthy.
Mhm.
Why? See,
Yeah.
why is interesting? Why are these aspects in these shows? Why talk about these institutions? Why talk about these secret societies?
Yeah,
Very
and
interesting.
speaking of shows and everything like that, and this is one of the last questions I want to ask before we get out of here is like The Simpsons. We know that they kind of predicted like Trump coming down the escalator and all this other stuff. And there's so much speculation. Are they time travelers? Do they have that special knowledge that nobody else does? And I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Hmm. It's interesting with The Simpsons because I've never looked into The Simpsons, but I know as a former journalist and as a writer, there are things that you find out about that don't become public until much later, but you become aware of them. I mean, there are things that I know about celebrities that have come out until much later in the major media and the so-called mainstream media and the press, other kinds of press. I mean, I was well aware of who Mel Gibson was in terms of his personality and his behavior and some of the things he believed in way before it ever came out and before he had his problems. I was aware of stuff about Trent Lott, who was a Republican politician, member of Congress, and some of his sort of racist views or nearly racist views, if you want to call it that. I was aware of certain things, and I'm aware of certain things. You find out about certain things when it comes to certain celebrities or certain figures, but they don't become public. And I think in a place like Hollywood, there are a lot of things, because that's in LA.
Mhm.
There are a lot of things that are known but are not spoken of.
Yeah,
And that's
well,
what people
I
have to
grew up in
understand.
Riverside, so I was about 60 miles
Mm.
east of Los Angeles, so where I grew up.
Right. So that's what you have to understand. You also have to be, you have to understand that sometimes, even with the internet and everything, things don't always come out right away.
Mhm.
They take time and they're held back. In the old days when it came to Hollywood, you had people at the studios that were fixers. At
Mhm.
MGM, you certainly had them. And that's their job was to quash and squash anything about
Yeah.
their major stars and about their contract players. They get into trouble, you make that trouble go away. So that's what you have to understand.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show and tell the listeners, viewers, where they can find out more about you, Final Cut, and everything. I know you mentioned it at the beginning, but want to give them a chance
Right.
to hear it again, just in case
Sure.
they tuned in late.
Right. So I would say if you want to check out my latest newsletters, check out about I've done a few articles already on as seen on TVs at Beehive. In fact, I have a article there about the show Seinfeld, which is at as seen on TV. I'm not a TV critic, but I play one on TV. Not quite, but it sounds good. Uh, so you can go to As Seen on TVs at Beehive. I have a couple of articles already. I'm also on a platform called Noted, NOTD, and I have a stream there called Sneak Reviews, which are film reviews, film reviews of movies from the past in general. So, variety of reviews there. You can go to Noted and check out Sneak Reviews and check it out. There are at least a couple of free ones. If you want, you could pay for some of the others. That would be gladly helped.
Uh,
Same with, I
yeah,
guess,
and if you
as seen
can
on
send me
TVs.
those links for Beehive and as seen on TV, because I don't think you sent me those. If you can send me links to those,
Mm,
I'll add them to the Talk of the Night website, and that way people can check
let's
out
see.
the link, because I do have the Substack on there and a couple of the podcasts
Okay.
that you've done.
All right. So getting to the Substack, I'll see if I can do that. I'm not very good with links, but when it comes to Substack Final Cut, you can find that at Al Lanier. That's ALLANIER.substack.com. That's my first film news stack. I'm sorry, Substack. And my second is all about reviews. So reviews of not simply movies from the past, but not as well known or obscure, sometimes fairly obscure. And that is thumbsdown.substack.com. That's thumbsdown.substack.com. And that's finals Substack / retro review. So you can go there, check out my podcast. It's coming up on its final episode soon this month. Final cut. It's also at allanier.substack.com. It's on Substack and also on Spotify. And the write off can also be found on Substack and on Spotify. So
All
that
right.
should be about it.
Well,
You can
thank
check
you
me
for
out there,
coming
and
on
I'll
the
be
show. I'll have you stick around for a moment until after we're off the air. And I want to again thank you and apologize for all the weird things that have gone on, but that is what happens when you talk about this kind of crazy stuff. So, uh, if you are enjoying Talking Tonight, why not take a piece of the show with you? Visit talkingtonight.com, click, hover over more, and then on Talking Night merch store, you can find for t-shirts, coffee mugs, ball caps. I'm gonna add more. I'm gonna add a new design. Of course, like I said, uh I got that contest going where you can listeners can enter to win one of the three books from my past guests and a t-shirt coming up at the end of August. So check out that on talkingtonight.com. Your support helps keep the conversation going. And if you want to put your business out in front of a passionate late night audience, then Talking Tonight is now welcoming advertisers and sponsors. Reach listeners interested in the topics discussed on the show. Visit talkingtonight.com to learn more or contact us today at talkingtonight@outlook.com. Grow your business with Talking Tonight until Friday night when I talk about the end of money and freedom. We continue the conspiracy kick. I shall see you on the dark side. Good night from Talking Tonight. All right, so we are out.